Okay, so I'm going to show you how to use Prezi by just starting with a blank template. So you may have chosen one of the templates that Prezi offered you, and you might find that some of the elements on there you don't need in your own Prezi. So at any time you can take these different pieces like the frame here and you can just click delete. Okay, so anything that you don't want on your Prezi you can get rid of at any time. And I can click undo and get it back. But I am going to delete this one to start with. I like to just start from a clean canvas. And that's my first point, which is I'm going to call this part in the middle your Prezi canvas. And I'm going to call this part on the left your path editor. All right, so that's important. There's a few options up here. And then on the right, there's some navigation. So if I click home, it'll kind of bring me back to this big screen. I can zoom out and I can zoom in, and I'll show you in a little while why that's so important. So I'm going to start with kind of a big picture here. So the first thing I want to tell you is that at any point you can just double click on the canvas and start adding your text. So I'll just add a title by Miss Mary. Okay, and if I click off it and then I come back to it, I'll have some options, like I can edit, I can make it bold, I can make there be a background color, all right, I can change the font a little bit, I can justify it, there's bullet points here, they're all important things. And something else I can do is I can move it around, make it bigger or smaller, and this little circle in the lower right will allow you to rotate the text, all right? You might find that to be important at some point. Okay, so that's how you add text, and you can add text on top of images or anywhere else on the canvas just by double clicking. All right, also up here are the themes for your Prezi, so I can choose a different theme and that will change the coloring of my Prezi a little bit, and also it will change the background color and the font. So I'm going to use this habitat theme. Up here is where you're going to insert images. So you can say image, symbols and shapes, diagrams, video, music, files. All right, there's a lot of stuff you can do. I'm going to look at the symbols and shapes first. There are different styles. So basically what you have here is a lot of clip art. You might find a lot of this stuff to be really important. I think that these thumbtacks work really well when you're looking at a map, all right? There's a lot of really good stuff over here. I can go back and look at any of these other kinds of styles and find more, all right? So make sure that you know that that clip art is there. Another thing I can insert are diagrams. You might find that some of these diagrams help you to make your point a little bit. All right, if you're weighing a couple of ideas, you can use these balance. And again, these are templates where you can remove any of the elements. Maybe you think a timeline would be helpful for yours. I'm going to just add this timeline so you can see what it looks like. So it'll add this timeline, and I can zoom in a little bit so that I'm able to work on it a little bit better. And I can change these. So if I'm maybe my timeline needs to go back a little bit further. Or maybe I want to just remove some of the parts. Maybe I don't need all of them. Sorry. I can change any of that. Maybe I don't want this box here. I can just delete it. Okay? So that's how you're going to add a timeline. You might find that some of those diagrams are really, really useful for what you're doing. And at any point I can kind of click on the outside of it here. Sometimes you need to zoom in a little bit to be able to grab stuff, and you know that you're grabbing it when it highlights like that. See how it goes from gray to blue? Now I know that I'm grabbing that entire timeline and not just elements of it. But if I want to just grab elements of it, I need to zoom in until I'm able to grab those. Zoom in a little further, and I can see that that frame gets highlighted, so I know I'm able to work with that now. Okay? So that's adding symbols and diagrams. I think that you'll find those really useful, and I think that's a nice feature of Prezi. You can add a YouTube video if you find that there's a video that really helps you to explain some of the points you're making. All you'll have to do is put in a link. But I'm going to show you next how to add an image. So it allowed you to search for a Google image, but we're not really going to do that because remember, we want only images that somebody has given us permission to use. So we're really focusing on images we can find on iClipArt.com, and then also some Creative Commons images we'll find. And so you're going to need to find those images and save them somewhere on your computer. The best idea is to save those into your own personal folder so that you can access them from any computer. So I'm going to just pick a picture of the library. So it adds the picture just in the original size, and I can make it bigger or smaller. I'm just going to make mine really big, and I'm going to make this picture kind of my Prezi. I'm going to make it like the background of my Prezi. Make sure that you don't pick a background image that is too small so that when you make it big, it's all pixelated and it doesn't look good, okay? So make sure that you have a good picture to use. If you're going to use a picture as a background, make sure you have one that works well for that. Okay, I'm going to move that timeline up here, but you'll see that I can add text on any part of this. I can just double click and start adding text on top of the picture. All right, so maybe down here I want to write computers. Okay, I can now, if I click off it and then click back on that text, I can move that to wherever I want. And I'm going to change the color of it to white so it's a little easier to see. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it smaller, but I'm going to zoom in on the picture a little bit, and I'm going to move it like that. Okay? So even though when I back up on the picture, I can't really see that, what Prezi will allow us to do is zoom in on that text. So I'll show you more about that in a little bit. In fact, I can add another image on top of this image. So if I click in here and I find another picture, just do another one of the library, I'll say resize image so that it's not too large. And I'll make it real small. And let's say I want this image to be a part of that timeline I already put in there. Make this image smaller, and I can move it onto that timeline. Okay, and then I'll be able to zoom in on that later, and I will go over that. Now, the next thing I want to show you how to do is add frames and arrows. These are a really important part of the presentation of Prezi because the frames tell Prezi what part you want to zoom in on. So if you want to zoom in on particular text, like where we added computers or where we added that photo, a good way to make sure that it cuts out everything around it and really zooms on that one part is to add a frame. So if I go up to frames and arrows, I'll see the things we have there. For instance, if I want to use an arrow, I can go like this. If I click on it, I can change it so it's a little bit smaller. I can change the color of it. I can move it around. I can curve it by using the middle one. Okay. But I would definitely want to add a frame around that little bit of text. So I'm going to zoom in on it. Now, I have several options for frames up here. The invisible frame, you won't be able to see it when you present, but it will frame just that little bit of information. I'm going to do a bracket frame. And I just highlight the area around what I want to frame. And then I'm going to add another frame around that image that I added up onto the timeline. And here I'll just do an invisible frame. And I'll take off this other frame just so it doesn't confuse us. Oops, it deleted my picture, so I'll click undo. When you put things inside of a frame, sometimes it'll delete everything inside of it. So I'll take that stuff off of the frame, delete it, and then I can put it back in. Prezi can be a little bit touchy. All right, so now I have some frames around my information. So the next thing you want to think about is how you want the presentation to move. What makes Prezi different than doing a PowerPoint is that PowerPoint moves in a linear fashion from one slide to the next slide. And Prezi can move in more of an abstract way, but you really want to think about presenting your ideas in a particular order and zooming in and out of your canvas to make sense, so that it makes sense to what you're trying to say. Because if you just zoom in and out without a real reason, you can make your viewer kind of sick. So you want to make sure that you have a reason for zooming in and out. Maybe you're trying to emphasize a certain point, okay? So the next thing I'm going to do is click on my path here. Now, there's already some things on my path. When I added that timeline added things to my path, but I'm just going to delete all this stuff so that we can start fresh. So the first thing I want to do, the first part of my path, I want it to just be this whole picture. I want that to be where we start. So if I click on that, it adds a box over here to my path. That's my first part. And then maybe I want to just have that text. I want to just kind of emphasize my title, all right? Then the next thing I want to do is move on to that part where it says computers. So once I have it highlighted, you'll see it's going to allow me by clicking on it to make it the third part of my path. If I add this arrow next, and then I want to maybe just add the whole timeline. And then I want to just zoom in on that one picture. If I click on the frame around it, then it will zoom in on just what I have framed. All right? So if I click over here on my path, I can see the way it moves. It starts in the big picture. Do you see how the rotating the text made it, the Prezi kind of move around? All right, so that's editing path. Let's say I want to animate this a little bit. Any of the parts of your path that have this option here, this star, it says animate frame content. So there's different parts of the frame that you can animate. If I click on that star, it'll take me to this animation editor. And any of those elements I can click on, like here, and it'll apply a fade in effect just to that element. So if I preview it, that means that picture will fade in when it goes to this part of the path. So that's the only kind of animation you can add. If I press that home button in the navigation bar, it'll take me right back to the beginning. Pardon me. So this is how you are going to add frames and pictures in Prezi to present your ideas in a way that you can decide. So it's not as constraining as a PowerPoint, but you have to really think about how you want to move from one idea to the next. Something you should notice is that up here at the top, Prezi saves every minute or so. So you can never lose too much work when you're logged into Prezi. If the computer shuts down, you can go back and most of your work should be there unless it's something you've just done in the last couple of seconds. That's a nice thing about Prezi, but you can always click save as well. And this present up here in the left will allow you to look at it full screen just the way your viewer would. And I can just use my arrows on the keyboard to see the way my Prezi will look. Click escape and I get back to my home canvas. Okay. So this is using Prezi. I think you'll really like it. I think it's pretty fun and it allows you to be really creative with how you want to present your ideas.